The year is 1836. North America is home to one of the most powerful countries in the world, the USA, who spent the last couple of decades expanding their territory with the Louisiana Purchase of 1803, the Treaty of Adamones in 1818, and the joint occupation of the Oregon Territory with British-controlled Canada. They would see an industrial revolution in the North and a slave-held economy in the South, which helped turn it into an economic powerhouse and a regional power. Then there's their neighbor, Mexico, who a couple of decades earlier gained independence from the Spanish Empire with the Treaty of Cordabo in 1821, forming the Mexican Empire, which only lasted for 2 years as it was riddled with problems, creating the Federal Republic of Mexico, which had similar problems to its predecessor, being financially ruined, politically divided, and having issues establishing control in their territory, like the sparsely populated North due to its climate/geography and local Indians resisting the Mexicans. Something that the government tried to solve in the Texas Territory by allowing Anglo settlers, largely from the U.S., to settle the territory in hopes of expanding control in Comanche tribal lands. However, this quickly became a problem as the territory became semi-independent and acted against the Mexican government.
Sheesh, they cannot catch a break.
Yeah, this territory would eventually declare independence due to increasing fears that their liberty and freedom were being taken away with increased military occupation, establishing the Republic of Texas, who still didn't recognize it and would have continued waging war on them, but international pressure would stop them.
Dang, that sucks for him.
Now, the USA was interested in this new country because for the past decade, they had tried to buy new land from Mexico with little success. The US thought about a possible annexation, but the threat of war and pro-abolitionist protesters prevented this. This would change with the 1844 elections, where a guy named James K. Polk ran on a campaign to expand US territory. Once in office, he planned to expand into Mexico's territory by provoking them into a war. Firstly, by annexing Texas in the hopes that Mexico would follow through on the threat of war if he did so. When that failed, he sent General Taylor into the newly disputed territory to provoke the Mexican government to take action. Taylor would follow through on this, inciting the 13 Affair, an incident where Taylor would build a fort in response to the local military telling him to leave. Mexico, in response, would send cavalry charge onto the fort that resulted in a death count of 14 men.
Polk must have been so happy.
Yeah, he was. In fact, after saying this, he would give a speech where he sang, "They spilled American blood upon American soil," begging for Congress to declare war on Mexico as a result of the affair. So, on May 13, 1846, the Mexican-American War began. The Texas Campaign started with the Mexican siege of Fort Texas that was promptly changed to Fort Brown after a soldier died in the event. It'd be relieved 5 days later by an American force in the Battle of Palo Alto, where the superior military and cavalry charge would make them retreat to the far side of the riverbed in the night. The Battle of Resaca de la Palma would ensue the next day, this time being a hand-to-hand battle. The arrival of the U.S. cavalry would crush the Mexican army, forcing them to retreat again. The army, though, would face heavy bombardment by the U.S. artillery as they retreated on uneven terrain, and part of the army would drown while trying to cross the Rio Grande River.
These guys are getting cooked by the U.S.
It wouldn't get any better. Taylor, in the aftermath, would cross the Rio Grande and wage war on the rest of northeastern Mexico. Santa Anna would beg the Mexican government to allow him to return from exile to take charge of the army, but was actually in a deal with the U.S. to become president and make peace with them. Anna, though, quickly went behind the U.S. and began preparing a defensive war against them. As he was doing so, politicians began resetting the government into a federal republic. Anna won the presidential election, but gave it to his vice president before moving north to retake land lost to the U.S., forcing the Mexican states to fund his military campaign.
What about Taylor?
Taylor had occupied Comago and after an intense urban warfare in the Battle of Monterrey, occupied Stilo, facing off against Santa Anna in the Battle of Buena Vista. They'd almost collapsed against his forces, but Santa Anna fled south after hearing rumors of an uprising in Mexico City. Note he would have most likely won had he continued the battle. Taylor's campaign would end here.
Can I please have more?
Sure. The New Mexican campaign began with General Stephen W. Coney's march southwest to take the Nuevo Mexican and Alta Californian territories. Coney's army moved towards the capital of the territory, Santa Fe. The Mexican government forced the town governor to muster an army to defend the city. However, he got cold feet and retreated, leaving the town open for invasion. Coney would march into the city the following day, declaring the entire Nuevo Mexican territory a part of the U.S., with him as governor, of course. Coney then left for Alta California. The local population would plan a rebellion on Christmas Day, but postponed it once the new governor got wind of it. The Taos Rebellion started instead on January 19, 1847, and was led by Thomas Armari and Pablo Montoya. Natives allying with the rebellion would raid the governor's house and kill him via arrow, scalping him afterwards. These actions forced the U.S. to send an army under Colonial Price to intervene. This all accumulated with the Battle of Canada, and once more at the Battle of Teos Pueblo, inflicting heavy casualties for the uprising.
What flavor is this?
Lechero. The uprising would end on July 9, 1847, after the death of the leaders in battle. To Alta California, we can see John C. Fremont marching towards the territory's capital. Earlier that month, locals, mainly consisting of American foreigners, would rebel due to rumors surrounding the Mexican government. The Bear Flag Revolt lasted a solid 25 days before forming a union with Fremont's party, creatively dubbed Fremont's Californian Battalion, and, with the help of John D. Solat's navy, commenced an invasion that would result in the entire San Francisco Bay and other key areas going under U.S. control. John would later seize San Diego, landing Fremont's battalion there as preparation for an invasion of LA.
Apparently the Mexican government didn't care much for their territory. Seeing how they seem to be nowhere, like where are they?
No, they did not. The Mexican government deemed it a lost cause and focused all troops for a defense of the heartland. The locals would instead act on their own, raising arms against the invaders at LA under Jose Maria Flores, repulsing another invasion, this time naval, later in the Battle of Dominiquez Rancho.
They're putting their own country's military to shame.
In the meantime, our dear friend Coney and his battalion had been marching westward for the past couple months. Unfortunately, right before he reached his destination, he was confronted by the locals, commencing the Battle of San Pascual. Coney's battalion would be dealt with heavy losses. Nonetheless, he pushed on and established a defensive position long enough for a U.S. relief force to arrive. He fought in a couple more battles before finally meeting the new naval commander for the Pacific Fleet, Robert F. Stocking. Together they combined to make the Stocking-Coney Union, who'd finally beat Flores in the Battle of La Mesa, finally leaving LA open for invasion. Flores and Pico later signed the Treaty of Coringa, ending all armed conflict in the territory.
Alright, now, how does war end?
How does it end? Well, for starters, Polk had begun to think that Taylor was incompetent. He'd planned for another front into the Mexican heartland under the command of Winfield Scott, hoping it would bring a swift conclusion to the war. On March 9, 1847, the blockade that had been put on Mexico since the start of the war finally broke through the non-existent navy, commencing one of the largest U.S. amphibious landings up until that point at Port Veracruz. Santa Anna allowed Scott's battalion to push into the Mexican interior, as he knew the place like the back of his hand, and hoped local diseases would ravage through his army. Anna planned for a battle at Cerro Gordo, so set up a defensive position around the canyons for an ambush. Scott saw right through this plan and sent a couple men ahead. Mexican troops exposed the position, thinking these men were Scott's battalion. Scott took an alternative route to the north, comprised of rough terrain, setting his artillery on high ground so he could flank Anna's battalion. In the ensuing battle, Anna's battalion will be inflicted with heavy casualties.
Boy, is it hot out here or what?
Scott engaged in multiple battles, slowly pushing deeper into the interior until he finally reached the capital, fighting for its fate against Anna in the Battle for Mexico City. Spoiler alert! He won and made himself the military governor during occupation. Anna, bitter about his defeat, joined forces with Joaquin Viriat and laid siege to Puebla, which he won, then sacked it of all its resources. It was short-lived though, because U.S. reinforcements were arriving en masse from Veracruz and laid siege to Puebla. Anna would fend them off, but as the days went on, his battalion slowly dissolved till his defeat at the Battle of Jumenla on October 9th, ending Santa Anna's last campaign. Peace talks began to be negotiated, with fighting breaking down into occasional skirmishes. Can you repeat that, Colton?
I need water.
I'm sure you can wait it out. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed on February 2, 1848, and marked the end of the Mexican-American War. The treaty stated Mexico had to give up one-third of its territory and pay $3 million to the U.S. as war reparations. The U.S. gave Mexico $15 million in return for reconstruction. In the following years, America would do what it does best: discriminate against the new locals. As Indians, yes, those ones, were brutally forced onto reservations while the Mexicans were oppressed and denied citizenship, all in an attempt to make way for the influx of white settlers looking for gold and opportunities, introducing several new states and territories into the Union. States that were a headache for the government because they brought up the topic of slavery. And I'm not going to talk about that because I'm lazy. Quick fact, many generals who fought in the Civil War participated in this. Many of them thought it was one of the most unfair and one-sided conflicts in history. Which, yeah, I can see that.
Get me out of here!
Mexico, on the other hand, well, was Mexico. Basically, Mexico only went downhill from there. Mexico began to face problems like being invaded by the British and French, the latter of whom tried to overstay their welcome and establish a puppet government. However, they were eventually kicked out, and Mexico would only get worse. But hey, at least they got the Yucatan Peninsula back. Anyway, Colton, let's get out of here. Oh. Okay, let's clear some things up. The Oregon Territory wasn't officially a part of the US until after the war, so just pretend that the British jointly occupied it for the entire video. The Yucatan Republic was independent from Mexico since 1841 due to politics and different cultures. Public opinions throughout this war were negative, as many saw it as an unjust war that was an act of aggression. Also, when signing the treaty, there was a debate on how much land they should take from Mexico because of how badly they crushed them. Some claim the US should take all of it, while others say they should take some land and establish multiple new republics. Lastly, during 1854, the US acquired extra land in return for giving Mexico $10 million. And that's why Arizona and New Mexico's southern border looks like it does today. Anyway, I hope you have a great day, and remember, chill vibes only.